Okay, so I figured I would do a video that showed a little bit more art of the game that I'm working on right now. So as you can see, I'm kind of working on an area in the game that has a lot of like dead wilderness, kind of rocky terrain, and I realized I didn't have a lot of assets that look dead, like everything's really green stuff, so I wanted to make some dead trees that I can put in the game that will actually fit this kind of area, because as you move through, you're going to get into areas that are a heck of a lot more dead and brown and desolate and not as green and vibrant. So I decided that I'm going to make a few different trees specifically for that. So I just will get right into it. So obviously, just as I always do, I have Sid right here, so I can use him kind of as a size reference, if I could talk. So we have him here, and just my brush settings. I think I'm gonna do like a poopy brown pine tree, I guess. I'm gonna have it kind of leaning. You know, it's not doing too good. So it's kind of leaning to like one side here. It's gonna have like pine needles and stuff hanging out on the floor. I'm actually gonna move this up a little bit. I'll just grab the whole thing right there. Yeah, there we go. So it's kind of leaning. As pine trees are, they're kind of cone shaped, but we'll make it a little fatter. There we go. And do like a trunk here. And I'll also be putting this in the engine, so if you guys want to watch that too, you can. I'm going to do this a little differently than the stuff that we did before. I'm actually going to show you how the trees are kind of done, because they're more of something you can actually walk around, right? So kind of like I've talked about before, I want to do the whole kind of Diablo thing, like you go behind it and it dims so you can see Sid behind it, so you don't lose track of yourself while you're playing. I'll kind of do like some roots, right? Like, yeah, little root things that come off here. The tree, pretty much all the trees kind of have that same little style. Growing up, I was a huge fan of Mark Kistler, who's a illustrator, and he had a show on Channel 9 called Mark Kistler's Imagination Station. He actually has a bunch of books now that he's written for kids to kind of like learn how to draw. And he always did that with his trees, and I thought it was really cool. So it's kind of something that I've kept around in my illustrations. So I'm just kind of texturing the tree now. It won't be really like sticky, like stickly. It'll still have, you know, it's pine needles, but they'll be pretty much dead. Just because I don't think a bunch of twigs would be all that interesting to look at. I already have one dead tree, like I showed you before, but I think this will be a little bit more interesting. So I'm just kind of texturing it up right now. Adding the little pine needles and whatnot. Adding a little stuff here, and we'll kind of add some texture to the trunk too, for the heck of it. And we're going to do this a little differently when we line it. I'm going to do the top of the trunk here, or the top of the tree, on its own separate layer aside from the trunk lines. And you'll see why that is, because I'm going to basically put this tree in two different pieces. So when you go behind it, the trunk will pretty much stay the same, but the top of the tree will dim. So now that I got my sketch here, I'm just going to go in, add my lines. I might sculpt them a little. I end up sculpting my lines a lot, I find. I'm a big fan of varying line widths. I'm kind of a stickler for how my lines look. Like this right here, I don't like how this just kind of hangs off. So I'll sculpt that. Come from that point up. I'll make sure they connect. And down. Up. And kind of, after you've drawn for a while, you kind of figure out which lines are better to pull and push. There we go. Oopsies. Alright. I'm just going to add like another little thing there. Add that. Nope. Not connected. There we go. Alright. It's like barely. There we go. That way you can actually see it a little better. Got a little bit more texture in there. And yeah, this is the fun part of just adding various leaves and texture patterns. Alright. Uh-oh. That line was not good. I'm just gonna add like a little texture in there for the heck of it. Make it a little easier to match up. Nope. Okay. And this just kind of helps make it look, you know, a little bit more interesting. Like if I could just do, I could just do an outline and then fill it with green and call it a day, but it wouldn't be all that interesting visually. It would just kind of look like an outline of a tree. I just kind of want this to feel kind of lived in, I guess. Obviously, it's a very cartoony game, so you know you definitely kind of have to deal with that. I don't want to say as a limitation, but it's definitely something you have to keep in mind the entire time while you're doing this stuff. Oops. No, no. There we go. Gotta come in and grab that one. Pull that one. Hear a dog barking in the background, so if you hear it over my microphone, I guess, sorry. Not much I can do about the neighbor's dog. Alright, and then we'll this one up, and this is kind of like, this is just, the bottom is kind of a free-for-all. Obviously I didn't really sketch it in too much. I'm gonna put this here just to kind of fill this in a little, I guess, so it kind of has more of that curve. Alright, come up like that, and make sure to grab that. There we go. Like I said, this is just kind of a, we'll see how this goes. It's not really sketched in, so I'm just gonna wing it. We'll do it live. I'm gonna take that from Bill O'Reilly. It's gonna be my thing now. People know about it because I do it, not because Bill O'Reilly did it. However, if you do want to have a good giggle, you should look up Bill O'Reilly. Do it live. He freaks out when his teleprompter doesn't work. It is amazing. Okay. So let's pull that off. I like to be able to see it a little better. Yeah, this looks I'll just kind of fill it in a little. In the area where there's a bit of dead space there. Okay. Granted, that'll be a different color, but we're going to label this layer. Label it treetop. Okay. You know what? Alright. I'm actually going to click. Why? Because branding. And that way people can find the Twitter if they found it some other way. This video, I mean. Alright, so we're going to do the bottom now. Again, on its own layer. We're going to just take that treetop off there. And we're going to do this a little differently. Kind of rough this up. So we don't need to be as exact with these lines as we were with the tree. So we're going to be doing like wood grains and stuff. Just a little bit. Don't want to make it too busy. It's kind of the weird little line you have to walk when you're doing stuff like this. Like you want it to be visually interesting, but you don't want it to be super busy so it's completely distracting. But the choices of color that you choose for a lot of the assets and stuff will kind of help fix that, I guess. Alright. I'll kind of connect this with like a few little creases, I guess. I don't like that line. There we go. Okay. Take that off. Okay. Like I said, we're gonna kind of do this like a stump. So when the top dims down, you can kind of see through it. Just like that. Pull that off. There we go. I make weird little noises when I draw sometimes. Yeah, I actually like that line. I wasn't really planning to go that far, but that doesn't look too bad. Like this. I think that's probably pretty good. Otherwise it'll get a little crazy. Okay, so now I'll just name this stump. Just like that. So now that we have our stump, we'll just completely keep that hidden. Let's take a look at this. Cool. So we're gonna duplicate our treetop. The reason we duplicate the top is we basically use the one that's on the top to color the lines, and then we use the one that's below that to do the fill. So we're going to pick a ugly brown color. I'm just going to fill the below one, right? Make sure to get these little guys here on the sides there. Cool. So that's pretty ugly. And now, so now that that's filled, we're going to take the one on top and we're going to do this a darker brown. That way you can still see the outline, but it's obviously still brown. Just like that. It's not black, obviously. So now that that's done, we'll make a layer that's on top of our color and below the lines. So you're basically shading in between the two layers for your lines and your color that you duplicated. So we'll grab that color, make it a little darker, and go in there. We'll do this all by hand. Like I said, you can also use the pen tool and things, and you can, there's obviously, just like with any other program like Photoshop or whatever, there's 15 million different ways to do things. And everybody else has their own kind of workflow when it comes to stuff. This is just the way I do it, so obviously, like, you don't have to copy me at all. Or you can, it's up to you. Some people use like black with a low opacity to shade. I like to actually use color. It just doesn't look the same to me, I guess. It's not as saturated. I like saturation in my color. I don't like a lot of kind of muted gray tones. Just kind of shade that like that. And we'll do like some little, yeah, to kind of texture the shading. Do that up here too, but not that much. There we go. Remember, light source is coming from up here, right? So when we do this, we're going to be thinking about that. So everything that's furthest away from the light source gets more of the shade. So that's something you always have to keep in mind while you're doing this, like where's your light source coming from? At least that's something I keep in mind when I'm working on game assets. And you know, maybe this is actually off the tree a little bit, so maybe it casts a little bit of a bigger shadow than some of the other ones. That's fine. Vary the shadows a little bit here. You know, maybe this is off a little bit too. So it's casting a bigger shadow than the rest. And this really kind of helps get the depth. And I might add a gradient to this just in Photoshop, like really quick, to kind of add some tone to the lines and things. That's about it. Okay. It's coming along pretty good, I would say. Fill that in. So that. I do a lot of line correction, as you can see. Okay. Perfect. And like I said, that doesn't really get hit by the light, so, because it's kind of behind this one right here. Definitely got to make sure to correct when you go outside your lines too. This isn't Photoshop where you have like the same type of clipping mask that you do there, so you got to be a little bit more careful. There we go. Uh-oh, I saw my lines. we'll take this off using the subtractive method. Meaning I just erase it rather than... There we go. Okay. I think that's actually pretty good. So we'll take that off. There we go. And again, vary the shadows that are kind of underneath these little pieces here. Cool. So yeah, they're all casting shadows. So now we have the shading, right? So now we have the highlights. Highlights, like I said before, and a bunch of other videos that I've done, can get a little distracting. So you kind of want to keep these to a minimum. Just kind of here and there. To kind of just help give it a little life and texture. These obviously do not take as much to do as the shading does. There we go. It's not bad at all. And I might add something to it, like texture-wise in Photoshop. Sometimes I do that. It definitely helps. So now we have the highlights and the shading. We're actually going to put this in a group. I'll even take the overlay off for a sec so you guys can see everything. So I basically make a folder for it, treetop. I take my treetop, and my treetop copy, my highlight layer, my shading layer. I shove these in there so I can just easily turn it off and turn it on all together. So now, same kind of method goes for the stump, and I'll do this with the overlay off for the moment so you can kind of see it better. So with that done, and I'll just take this off. So with this done, I have my stump copy and my stump. Now my stump below it is going to be the one that I use to do my color fill. The stump copy is the one that I'm going to use to do my line fill, just like I did with the treetop. So we'll turn that back on so I can better look at the color I'm using. We're going to grab the color from the tree to make sure that this varies more. But we also have to unlock it and also make sure that we're on the right layer. So we'll grab that color and we'll lock it again. We'll go back to our stump and we'll pick a darker color and we'll fill it. We'll fill these two back there. Cool. So now that that's done, we will collapse this again, turn that off, and now we're going to pick our line color. So we're going to lock that, and just pick the color we have currently, and a darker brown. Let's look at that. Okay, perfect. That works great. So now, your tree is getting there. It's not entirely done yet. So now we'll turn that off again. Obviously, now you want to pick a color for the shading that's between the color for the actual stump itself and the color for the lines. Because otherwise, wherever you put the shading, it will just look like you have like really bold lines. So we're going to, just like the tree, put the shading between the line color and the fill color, right? And we're going to put that back on because you don't need to see the layers anymore. Alright, so that's perfect actually. And we're just gonna go in here, and like I said, trying to remember, you know, where our light source and stuff is coming from. Go in here. Try and remember like what all would be hit with by the light right now, because we have this kind of like stump piece that is coming off of the tree, so this is going to block a lot of light in here, and then this is also behind it for the most part, so that's going to get blocked by a lot of the light. And I'm going to come in here. The thing you have to remember is shadows show contour, right? They show depth, so shadows really help control the shape of an object. So the more round I make this, the more fat. Like if I do this, all of a sudden it changes the shape of the trunk in here. Whereas if I erase it and come down here, it just looks like it's kind of like a fat stump. So this way, it looks like one shape. That way it looks like another. Right? And if I do like a little shade here, then it looks like it's got its own little divot right in here that's kind of not getting hit by light. So it's kind of interesting when you think about it like that. It wasn't until I really started thinking about shading and lighting in that way that I finally started to really kind of get a grasp on shading, because I used to be really, really bad at it. Okay. It's not too bad. See, there's a little part in here, and it's kind of like an indent in the tree. And then we'll just do this. So now that this is all done, we need to figure out what the shading is going to do based on the tree that's on top of this, right? So we'll turn that back on. We'll come in here and we'll do this. This will help add the depth that we need. Now, you see here where like my color has kind of come off right there. We're just gonna go in and erase that by taking those off. Cool. I'm gonna just fill this in entirely. Whoopsies. Yeah, just paint this the same color. Cool. Now, there is one thing that we're missing here. Before we add that, we're gonna put the stump in its own folder, just like we did the treetop. So there it is. We're going to add our highlights real quick. Obviously, pick your main mid color. And I mean, it's a tree, right? It's not metal. It's not shiny. It doesn't need like crazy highlights. It doesn't need highlights that are like, you know, various different colors and stuff. It's a tree. And of course, like this part up here isn't really going to get hit by any light because it's going to be covered by the tree. So we really don't need to worry about that. And, you know, like I said, this is where the light's hitting it, so make sure that's in there. I also like to make my background like a random color. I'll usually use a green color. That color green's a little obnoxious there. It's a little darker now. And looks like I missed a shadow area, which is just this under here. Cool. But now, we need a shadow, right? We need a Drop shadow. Oh look, in this shading bit right here, needs to get torn off. Yeah. So we'll just erase it. Ta-da. Cool. And I also need to add the little bit right here. So now that's done, put a layer under the stump and the tree itself. And put the tree top on. How's that looking? Okay, that's looking pretty good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of a blob shadow, as my buddy Andrew likes to call them. He does blob shadows all the time. We're going to add that. This also helps it kind of stand out better. I'll actually show you here. See, like they all have them. Like this tree over here has it, and this tree has one. It helps them stand out against everything else that's going on. Pretty much everything needs to kind of have a shadow. Like the fences, the stairs, even these rocks down here have shadows. So we're going to go back to adding the shadow. We're going to drop its transparency down. Actually, first we're going to take that off. Flash likes to do this outline thing if you don't remember to just turn it off, which I usually don't. And we're just going to make that a symbol so we can dim it down. Alpha. I usually like 45. Cool. So now that that's all done, we're going to take that off, and we're going to save it. Now we're going to export the image out. We're going to call this dead tree trunk. And it doesn't matter if we basically use Flash's size. In Engine, we'll crop it down, and then it'll fit pixel perfect. So now that this is all done, we're going to take these off, and we're going to show just the top. We're going to export this out, export image. We're going to call this dead tree top. Cool. So now that that's all done, I'm going to close Flash. I'm going to open Photoshop. That actually looks really cool. A little background with the overlay. Branding, son. Alright, now. So we're going to open dead tree top. That's really all we need. And we can just go to select all, tear it out, tear off the background. We're going to save this again, just in case for some reason they need to come back to the other version. We're going to save it off as something else. So we're going to do top resized. I usually have like 5 or 6 different versions of everything just to make sure I can go back to any point in time and fix whatever I need to fix. We're going to go create clipping mask. So I'm going to take the overlay off so you can see that. Actually, I'm going to take the webcam off and the overlay. So now that you have this done, you have the clipping mask down here. You basically just make a layer on top of whatever you want the clipping mask to sit to. Right click, create clipping mask. It's pretty simple once you get down to it. Now that that's all done, we can set the clipping mask to an overlay blend layer. Pick the color black. And overlay some really nice kind of color differences. And we're going to use the radial gradient, not the linear. Radial kind of better simulates what light actually does. So we're going to actually do that. Now, that looks a little harsh, right? Like, that's super dark. So we're just going to adjust the opacity down to about 50. There we go. And we're actually going to do, on the same layer, it doesn't even matter. Actually, no, it'll matter. We'll do another clipping mask, overlay also, but we'll use white this time. We'll just kind of make a little, like I said, the sun is coming from here, right? That's your light source. And because all these like lights and stuff are kind of baked into the assets themselves, the engine itself, I mean, it can do some really cool lighting effects, but it doesn't have to, which really kind of helps with performance. I mean, it's a 2D game. It's not anything with any crazy dynamic lighting, so it really helps. So now we're going to save this as a PNG, so it's transparent and lossless, so it won't get grainy like it would with a GIF or a GIF for you GIF people. So we got top resized, cool, save. So now that that's all done, we're going to close out Photoshop, and we are going to go back to Construct. So now we have Construct open, and I will usually put them in my environment pieces. So like, here's everything that I can use to build an environment. And here's where most of my trees and stuff are. So I'll just come down here, insert new object, pick a sprite, tell it where to drop it, which also doesn't work sometimes, which is great. So we have dead tree trunk open. Cool. Now, obviously, there's a huge amount of dead space around this trunk, which you don't need. But if you don't crop this down, the engine basically still like renders it, right? Even though they're transparent, it's still something that it has to do, which is a real performance issue if you just leave it like this. So we can just hit this button, it says crop transparent edges, and if this was actually part of an animation, all I would have to do is hit shift and hit this button, and it'll do it for every single frame of that animation. But I can just click that, ta-da, trunk, right? So now, like I said, sometimes it doesn't always put it there, which is awesome. But what Construct does is it saves everything that is imported for the first time without a name as sprite, as long as you're importing a sprite. Cool. So there it is. There's our tree trunk. Hey guys, how's it going? So we're going to name this dead tree trunk. Alright, we got that. And we're going to do the same thing for the top. And remember we said top resized PNG. So open. And this doesn't actually have to be cropped because we pretty much already did it in Photoshop. So that's perfect. And again, for some reason, didn't paste it in there. But we can easily just grab it here, drag it in. Perfect. So now there we have our two-piece tree. And we got to rename that, so dead tree top. Now, the way Construct works is all of your programming and stuff like that and all your logic are all put into event sheets. And you can link them up and you can categorize them, which is how I do it, so I can better keep track of where everything is. So everything has its own name. So I'm just going to, everything's kind of a miscellaneous, just random thing like, you know, UI dims and stuff like that are all in my just main. They're not super intensive. I want to just, there's kind of miscellaneous, just random stuff that happens in the game, usually like polish things. So we'll make this a group, and we'll call this Dead Treetop. Cool. And we'll basically tell it that when Sid on collision with Dead Treetop, Dead Treetop will dim. So we go to set opacity, and we'll drop it to 40. But we also have to make it so, because right now the way it'll work, it'll be normal. Sid will run into it, and then it will stay at 40. Like, so we have to basically have a way for the game to set it back to 100. So we take this, we basically say Sid is overlapping Dead Treetop, but we don't want it to be set to overlapping, so we invert this. So basically this tells it, so when Sid isn't overlapping Dead Treetop, we just copy and paste that, set it to 100. And now, in my game I have something called layer bounce, and that basically makes it so Sid can run around objects. So for me, because it's already set up, I can just go to the family, and then go to layer bounce items. Obviously there's a lot of stuff there. Just edit it. I can add dead tree trunk. Cool. So now it'll kind of bounce up and down, so it'll look like Sid can run around it. And we will go back to my environmental pieces, grab this, and we're going to stick this in our layout. We'll just like put it right here just to check it. This happens because it's on the wrong layer, and that layer that it's on right now is invisible, so that's why the boxes are there, but it's invisible. So we'll be like this, click, cool. Now it's visible. And we'll make sure that the top is on tree, structures, and tops, because this is always basically going to be on top of Sid, essentially. So it'll kind of look like when he walks up to it, it'll kind of hit him on the top of the head. So now we'll just add like a simple collision box to the tree. You can use polygonal collision for it and give like the trunk its own collision. Which, you know what? I think we will. I think we will. We'll just make it easier later on. And this trunk is also a lot more simple than like the other objects and stuff are. So yeah, we'll just do that. So we give it a behavior, and we give it a solid behavior. And with the behaviors that Sid has, the game will know that he's going to basically bounce off this trunk. And this is how you give it a collision. This would be its collision box right now, which is obviously terrible. And the more points you give a collision box, the more it's going to impact your performance. So I would recommend keeping it to about 4. Keep things relatively simple. And just kind of generally keep the shape of the tree. I'm actually going to put this up a little higher so Sid kind of be more in front of it. Cool. I think that'll work actually. And we'll grab Sid. We'll bring him down here. I'm actually going to move that up a little just to kind of help better show things. Whoa. Whoa. Alright. And then we wait for this to load. Yeah, so this is kind of how a lot of the assets are done. Obviously not all of them are done in pieces like this. Some things are very kind of small, like a rock, and you can just make them one piece. You don't need anything that like dims, but anything that's super tall or wide that you might be around for a while, or you could possibly lose yourself behind, will usually be done that way. That way it can kind of fade or do different things. So you don't lose yourself behind them when you're fighting an enemy or what have you. So it's about to load. Uh-oh. There we go. So now we have the tree. And if you look, I can bump into it. Okay. But like I said, it kind of looks like you're standing in front of it. But then you can walk around it, and now you're behind it. And as you see, the top of the tree dims. Okay. See, and that way you can still see where you are, and then you can wander off, and the tree returns to normal. And the game knows how to handle all that, so perfect. And we'll, of course, save that out. But that is essentially how a lot of the things are done in Sword and Board. So hopefully this is at least somewhat interesting. We'll probably be doing a lot more art slash game dev videos like this to kind of help explain, you know, how things are put in the game and stuff like that. And hopefully you guys will enjoy it. I know I've gotten a lot of requests lately for the art stuff. A lot of people want to kind of see my process and how I draw, which is great. But I know there's also people out there that are a little bit more interested in how like the whole game is put together. And I really want to kind of put stuff out there for you guys to see and kind of learn from. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube channel, or you can go to the Facebook page for Sword and Board and leave me a message there. And I will do everything I can to retweet you or send you a message back or what have you. So take care. Bye.